As the golden September sun began its gentle ascent over the rolling hills of the Montana Territory, Sarah Beth knelt beside her weathered wooden fence, her calloused hands clasped tightly in prayer. The morning dew still clung to the wild prairie grass, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark's song carried on the crisp autumn breeze. She had learned through seasons of heartache and hope that September mornings held a special kind of power, a threshold between the harvest of what was and the promise of what could be. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves, "I come to you this September morning with a heart that's been broken and mended more times than I can count. You know the weight I carry, the dreams that seem as distant as those mountains on the horizon. But I've learned that breakthrough doesn't always come with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it comes quiet as morning dew, gentle as this September breeze." Sarah Beth's story wasn't unique on the frontier. Every settler, every dreamer who had pushed westward, carried similar burdens: the ache of leaving family behind, the constant struggle against an unforgiving land, the loneliness that could swallow a person whole under the vast western sky. But what set Sarah Beth apart was her unwavering belief that each new day, especially these precious September mornings, offered a chance for divine intervention. She had arrived in Montana 3 years ago with her husband Daniel and their young son Timothy, following promises of fertile land and fresh starts. Daniel had been a dreamer, full of plans for their homestead, talking late into the night about the crops they'd plant, the life they'd build. But dreams have a way of crumbling under the weight of reality. The harsh winter of their second year had claimed Daniel to pneumonia, leaving Sarah Beth a widow with a 6-year-old boy and a half-built cabin that seemed to mock their grand aspiration. "I remember that first September morning after Daniel passed," she continued in her prayer, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. "I was so angry, Lord. Angry at you, angry at this land, angry at myself for believing we could make something beautiful out here. But you met me in that anger, didn't you? You didn't scold me for my rage or turn away from my tears. You just waited, patient as this prairie grass, until I was ready to hear your whisper again." The breakthrough hadn't come immediately. That first September after Daniel's death had been the longest month of her life. Timothy had grown quiet and withdrawn, spending hours staring out at the empty fields where his father had planned to plant wheat. The neighboring families had offered help, but charity felt like salt in an open wound. Sarah Beth had been raised to stand on her own 2 feet, and accepting handouts seemed like admitting defeat. But on a September morning much like this one, as she knelt in the same spot by the fence, something had shifted. It started with the smallest thing: a red-winged blackbird landing on a nearby fence post, tilting its head at her as if truly seeing her for the first time in months. In that moment, she felt a presence so real, so tangible that she could almost reach out and touch. "That was you, wasn't it, Lord?" She smiled now, remembering. "Speaking through one of your smallest creatures, reminding me that I wasn't forgotten, that my story wasn't over." That little blackbird stayed with me through my entire prayer that morning. And when I finally stood up, I knew things were going to change. Not because my circumstances would magically improve, but because my heart had shifted. I was ready to receive what you had been trying to give me all along. The breakthrough had come in waves after that. First it was Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring homestead, arriving with fresh bread and an unexpected proposition. Her arthritis was getting worse, she explained, and she needed help with her extensive vegetable garden. Would Sarah Beth consider a partnership? Sarah Beth could tend the garden in exchange for a share of the produce, plus a small wage that would help her through the winter months. It wasn't charity. It was opportunity disguised as necessity. Sarah Beth threw herself into the work with renewed purpose. She discovered she had a natural gift for coaxing life from the stubborn prairie soil. Under her care, Mrs. Henderson's garden flourished like never before. The tomatoes grew heavy and red, the beans climbed their stakes with enthusiastic vigor, and the squash spread across the ground in abundance. "You used my empty hands, Lord," Sarah Beth prayed, flexing her fingers in the morning light. "These hands that felt so useless after Daniel died, you filled them with purpose again. You showed me that breakthrough sometimes looks like dirty fingernails and aching muscles, like sweat mixed with tears of joy instead of sorrow. Timothy had begun to change too. At first he had been reluctant to help in the garden, preferring to sit alone and whittle sticks into shapeless pieces. But gradually the magic of watching seeds transform into food drew him in. He became fascinated with the process, asking endless questions about why some plants thrived while others struggled, how the soil knew what to give each seed, whether the vegetables could feel the sunshine on their leaves. One September evening, as they worked together harvesting the last of the summer squash, Timothy had looked up at his mother with eyes that held a spark she hadn't seen since his father's death. "Mama," he said, "I think Papa would be proud of our garden. I think he can see it from heaven, and he's smiling." That was when Sarah Beth truly understood the nature of breakthrough. It wasn't a single moment of dramatic change, but rather a gradual transformation that happened so naturally, so organically, that you almost missed it if you weren't paying attention. Like the way morning gradually lightens the sky, or how a seed slowly pushes through dark soil toward the sun. Breakthrough was often a quiet miracle dressed in ordinary clothes. The second wave of breakthrough came through the most unlikely source, old Jacob Müller, the German immigrant who owned the general store in the nearest town. Jacob was known for his gruff manner and sharp business practices. Most folks kept their dealings with him brief and to the point. But one September afternoon, when Sarah Beth brought in her surplus vegetables to trade for winter supplies, Jacob had surprised her with an unexpected conversation. "These vegetables," he said in his thick accent, holding up one of her perfect tomatoes, "they are the finest I have seen in this territory. Where did you learn to grow such food?" Sarah Beth had explained about her partnership with Mrs. Henderson, how she'd discovered her knack for gardening through necessity rather than training. Jacob listened with growing interest, then made a proposal that took her breath away. He wanted to buy all her surplus produce, not just for his store but to ship to the mining camps in the mountains where fresh vegetables commanded premium prices. "But I'm just a widow with a small garden," Sarah Beth had protested. "I don't know anything about running a business." Jacob's weathered face had creased into what might have been a smile. "In the old country, my grandmother always said that God gives every person a special gift, but not everyone is brave enough to unwrap it. You, Mrs. Sarah Beth, you have unwrapped yours. Now you must decide what to do with it. Lord, you work in such mysterious ways." Sarah Beth continued her morning prayer, watching as the sun climbed higher, painting the grassland in shades of gold and green. "Who would have thought that grumpy old Jacob would be the one to show me the path forward? But you used him to open my eyes to possibilities I never would have imagined. You took my small success and multiplied it, just like the loaves and fishes in your holy word." The business partnership with Jacob had transformed everything. Sarah Beth expanded her garden, learned about crop rotation and companion planting, studied which vegetables traveled best, and commanded the highest prices in the mining camp. Timothy became her eager apprentice, developing his own area of expertise in herbs and medicinal plants that grew wild on the prairie. But perhaps the most profound breakthrough came in an area Sarah Beth had never expected: community. As word spread about her thriving garden and growing business, other struggling homesteaders began to seek her advice. She found herself teaching nervous newcomers how to read the soil, sharing seeds with families who couldn't afford to buy them, organizing informal gatherings where neighbors could trade knowledge along with produce. "You turned my isolation into connection, Lord," she prayed. "All those months when I felt so alone, so cut off from everything that mattered, you were preparing me to become a bridge for others. My pain became the foundation for purpose I never could have imagined." The morning sun was fully up now, warming Sarah Beth's face as she continued her prayer. Around her the September landscape hummed with activity: bees working the late-blooming wildflowers, grasshoppers chirping in the tall grass, the distant sound of Timothy's laughter as he played with the neighbors' children who had come to help with the harvest. This particular September morning held special significance. Today marked exactly 3 years since Daniel's death. But instead of grief, Sarah Beth felt overwhelming gratitude. Not because the pain had disappeared, she still missed her husband every day, but because she had learned to see God's hand in all of it, even the dark times that had seemed meaningless while she was walking through them. "I understand now, Lord," she said, her voice stronger as her prayer drew toward its close. Breakthrough isn't about avoiding the valleys or skipping over the hard parts. It's about trusting you enough to keep walking, one step at a time, even when the path disappears into darkness. It's about believing that you can take the broken pieces of our dreams and create something even more beautiful than what we originally imagined. She thought about Maria Santos, the young Mexican woman who had arrived in the territory just last month with her 3 small children, and a husband who drank away their savings faster than he could earn them. Sarah Beth had seen the familiar look of desperation in Maria's eyes, the same look she had worn during those first terrible months after Daniel's death. Without hesitation, she had offered Maria work in the expanded gardens, along with a place to stay in the small cabin she had built for seasonal helpers. Maria had exceptional skills with preserving and preparing foods, knowledge passed down through generations of women in her family. Together they had begun experimenting with ways to extend the shelf life of produce for the long journey to the mining camps. Their pickled vegetables and dried herb blends were becoming almost as sought after as the fresh produce. "You're using my breakthrough to create breakthrough for others, aren't you, Lord?" Sarah Beth smiled. "That's how your kingdom works. Blessing flowing through blessing, breakthrough multiplying breakthrough, hope spreading like seeds on the wind." The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A rider was coming up the dusty road that led to her homestead, and as the figure drew closer, she recognized Dr. William McCarthy, the traveling physician who made rounds through the scattered settlement. His visits were rarely social calls, and Sarah Beth felt a familiar flutter of anxiety as she rose from her knees and brushed the dust from her skirts. "Good morning, Sarah Beth," Dr. McCarthy called, as he dismounted. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just having my morning conversation with the Lord," she replied. "What brings you out this way so early?" Dr. McCarthy's expression was serious but not alarming. "I've been hearing interesting things about your operation here, about the vegetables you're growing, the business you've built, the way you're helping newcomers get established. I have a proposition that might interest you." He explained that the territorial government was looking for experienced settlers to help establish agricultural programs in newly opened regions. They needed someone who understood both the practical aspects of frontier farming and the human side of helping families build new lives in challenging circumstances. The position would involve traveling to new settlements, teaching sustainable farming methods, and helping communities develop cooperative systems for mutual support. It would mean living here for several months each year, Dr. McCarthy concluded, "but the compensation would be substantial, and you'd be helping shape the future of this territory. From what I've observed, you have exactly the combination of skills and character they're looking for." Sarah Beth's mind raced as she considered the implication. Just 3 years ago she had been a broken widow, convinced her usefulness was over. Now she was being offered an opportunity to influence the development of an entire region. It was a breakthrough so far beyond her original dreams that she could barely comprehend it. "I'd need time to pray about it," she said finally, "and to discuss it with Timothy. This has been our home, our refuge. It's hard to imagine leaving, even temporarily." Dr. McCarthy nodded understanding. "Of course, but don't take too long to decide. Opportunities like this don't come around often, and I have a feeling you're exactly what those struggling communities need." After he left, Sarah Beth returned to her spot by the fence, but instead of kneeling, she stood looking out over the land that had become her salvation. The morning was advancing, and she could see Timothy in the distance, walking among the rows of vegetables with a notebook, carefully recording which plants were ready for harvest. Her heart swelled with pride at the young man he was becoming, responsible, curious, compassionate toward others who were struggling. "Lord, is this another breakthrough you're preparing?" she asked softly. "Another step in a journey I never could have planned or imagined. I've learned to trust your timing, your way of opening doors just when we're ready to walk through them. But this feels so big, so far beyond anything I ever thought possible." She closed her eyes and let the September breeze wash over her face, carrying with it the scents of rich earth, ripening vegetables, and the subtle change in the air that spoke of autumn's approach. In the stillness, she felt that familiar presence, the same one that had met her in her darkest moments, and had been with her through every breakthrough since. The answer came not in words but in a deep settled peace that filled her chest and spread through her entire being. This was indeed the next step, the next chapter in a story that God had been writing all along. Her experiences here, the loss, the struggle, the gradual building of something beautiful from the ashes of her original dreams, had all been preparation for something larger. "I understand now, Lord," she whispered. "The breakthrough was never just about saving my own life, or building my own security. It was about preparing me to be your instrument in saving and building up others. Every lesson learned through heartache, every skill developed through necessity, every relationship forged through mutual struggle. It was all leading to this moment, this opportunity to multiply the blessing. The sun was high now, painting the world in brilliant September light. Sarah Beth could hear the sounds of the day beginning in earnest. The distant lowing of cattle, the cheerful voices of neighbors arriving to help with the harvest, the gentle sounds of a community that had grown around shared purpose and mutual support. As she stood there, surrounded by the abundant life that had grown from what had once seemed like barren ground, Sarah Beth felt a profound sense of completion and anticipation all at once. The prayer she had spoken that morning, like all the September morning prayers before it, had been heard and answered in ways that exceeded her highest hopes. The breakthrough had come not as a single dramatic moment, but as a series of openings, each one leading naturally to the next, like rooms in a house she hadn't known she was building. Each challenge had been a doorway, each loss a clearing away of obstacles she hadn't realized were blocking her path. What had felt like an ending had actually been a beginning in disguise. Standing there in the golden September light, surrounded by the fruits of faith made manifest, Sarah Beth understood that this was how breakthrough really worked, not as an escape from the human experience of struggle and uncertainty, but as a transformation of it, a way of walking through difficulty that turned even the hardest seasons into soil for something beautiful to grow. And somewhere in the distance, a red-winged blackbird called out across the prairie, its song carrying on the September breeze like a benediction, like a promise that the best was yet to come.